A pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back to Survival of No Limits. Today, on Survival of No Limits, let's go on ahead and talk a bit more about some scars. And I do in fact have a few more that I really want to show off to the public. So, let's go ahead and talk about the legs again. Now, for the record, I've already mentioned how this in fact was probably one of the most significant that I've ever gotten, and probably one of the worst that I might have ever had in my life. Now that's just my left leg, but have I ever talked about the history of my right leg? Here we basically have my right leg in action. Now, right around here, yeah, there's a little spot right there. You probably can't necessarily look at it very well or even see it, much less look into the video itself. But anyways, this right here is pretty much a hot spot. Yeah, literally, a hot spot. It was a time where I actually got myself a pretty nasty burn. And I'll go ahead and explain the whole thing, telling the story from the very beginning. 2010 is probably what I will recall being the greatest year I've ever had in the history of my own life. And maybe there will be so many people who would agree with me there. There's a lot of amazing billion-dollar-plus movies that were out there, including the almighty third Toy Story film, Due Date, and a handful of others pretty much. And who could ever forget the year 2010 was probably one of the biggest, most influential ever things out there in the world of modern music. I mean, Anne Boleyn released an album in 2010, there was a Michael Jackson album in 2010, a year after Jackson had died. Now that's just crazy, if you ask me. And who could ever forget many others like Elton John and Leon Russell and Janelle Monáe, pretty much. 2010 was a huge year for music and movies and even a lot of other things as well. Heavy Rain was probably one of the greatest video games I might have ever had the chance to play, alongside Call of Duty Black Ops 1. And I tell you, 2010 was just chock full of so many good things out there that it's just like impossible to dislike it, as I have agreed with it my whole time in the past 11 years. So 2010 is the best year I've ever had in my whole life, period. And 2010 pretty much being the one to single out 2020, which that I actually consider to be the 6th best year ever, pretty much. There might be a time where I might actually have to go ahead and talk about the top 10 best years and top 10 worst years. I guess we'll find out along the way or down the road pretty much. But anyways, my right leg, of course, this right here, was basically a pretty darn horrible accident. It was a time where we actually did have ourselves a lot of extra things out there, like firewood and all that good stuff, branches, twigs, leaves, especially ones that were rotten and crumbly. And as a result, there were lots of occasions where we would start a lot of fires. The late 2000s and early 2010s were a huge time for us to be lighting fires, especially because of these different things. Lots of people were going green, and as a result, lots of trees had grown, lots of plants had accumulated, lots of environmental impacts have been taken effect by this point. And here we are, over a decade later. It does seem like a lot of it seems to thrive a whole lot better, but because of a lot of controversies that had happened, the California drought, and of course the infamous plastic in the ocean craze that's still ongoing to the present day, I'd still at least go as far to say we've had better times in this whole entire decade, the way I see it. But the 2010s was also a pretty horrible time for me as well. I will gladly talk a bit more about those later on because I really feel like I'm getting off track here. At one point in time, in November 2010, one of the last times we would ever put up a fire for the rest of the entire year, I ended up accidentally allowing a small piece of burnt charcoal to fly out of the flames, and it landed right onto my leg, right at that very spot. Man, It was like a live ember that has just landed right there on my right leg. As crazy as you might think it sounds, it's just true. The scar is probably not even there much anymore because, as I've said before, it's not quite as visible as it used to be 11 years ago, but November 2010, quite a big time to be alive for the most part, but it was also not at all a good time to burn like crazy, like I pretty much was. I mean, it was absolutely horrible, like in all ways horrible, no matter what you're looking at. But it's pretty much not to worry. Of all scars that I had obtained over the years, I gladly consider this one to be a minor case, because treating burns was pretty much a win. For me to simply get it cooled down, then have it disinfected, and then covered up with a bandage. And man, did it hurt like crazy. I mean, I do not intend on making this stuff up. Amongst anything that I could have ever possibly had, that November 2010 scar was certainly quite a thing to talk about. I was pretty much just waiting around with a lot of pain, a lot of soreness that naturally comes by whenever you get burned in those kinds of areas, pretty much. As I've said before though, I've had better times, but at the same time a lot of things were potentially worse, especially in the years that followed after 2010. Because, as you might already know, I've talked about a few other scars that I've obtained throughout those years. And at the time, November 2010, I considered this one to pretty much be the second worst that I've pretty much had. With the first, of course, being on my left leg with that animal attack that happened late at night. So, that's just pretty much what I got to say about that part. Now, I will in fact have a few more that I will be talking about soon. But until then, if you want to see more go down on my channel, then make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.